They say trust doesn't always break with betrayal. Sometimes it erodes through games people call harmless. My wife, Leah, loved games. She said they kept our marriage interesting. But that morning, standing in our kitchen with the clock ticking past 8:30 and my car keys missing for the third time that week, I learned that some games are just disguised control. Before we go further, don't forget to like, comment, and share if you've ever dealt with someone who thought your frustration was funny. Subscribe for more stories that uncover the quiet wars hidden in everyday lives. I was already late for work. My coffee sat untouched, growing colder by the minute. The sound of Leah humming from the living room floated through the house like an insult. "Leah," I called, trying to keep my voice even, "have you seen my keys?" She appeared in the doorway, smiling the way people do when they already know the answer. "Keys," she said, tilting her head. "You mean the ones you're always losing?" "Yes," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Those ones." She walked toward me, dragging her fingers across the counter as she passed. "Maybe you should try being more organized. Like me." I bit my tongue. I'd learned long ago that arguments with Leah weren't fights. They were performances, and she always wanted an audience. But that morning, I was already late for a meeting I couldn't afford to miss. I started searching the kitchen drawers, the coffee table, the couch. My hands shook, partly from anger, partly from panic. She leaned against the wall, sipping her smoothie, watching. "You're enjoying this," I said finally. She shrugged. "Maybe a little. You're so serious all the time, Ethan. You need to loosen up." "Loosen up?" I turned toward her. "Leah, I'm 20 minutes late." "Then maybe you should have started looking earlier," she said, smirking. It hit me then. This wasn't forgetfulness or teasing. She'd hidden them. I didn't know where, but the way she avoided my eyes told me everything. She wanted this. She wanted me late, flustered, humiliated. It was a joke to her. "Leah," I said slowly, "give me my keys." She raised an eyebrow. "And if I don't?" I walked closer. "Then this won't be funny anymore." She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a scared one. A confident, sharp one that told me she knew exactly how much power she held. "Oh, calm down, Ethan. It's just a joke. I'll give them back after you apologize for snapping at me yesterday." Apologize? For snapping at her? The irony stung. I didn't argue. I turned, walked past her, and left the house. I slammed the door behind me hard enough to make the picture frames tremble. It wasn't until I was outside that I realized I couldn't even drive to work. My keys were gone, and with them, my morning. When I finally found them, tucked neatly into her gym bag hours later, I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't anger. Anger burns and fades. This was colder, quieter, a sense of being studied and toyed with. She'd hidden them not because she was angry, but because she could. Because she liked knowing she could interrupt my world with something as small as a missing object. That night, she acted like nothing had happened. She laughed at the TV, poured herself a glass of wine, and talked about her upcoming online job interview, as if we were the same couple we used to be. I nodded, pretending to listen, but inside I was counting seconds. Every second she smiled without remorse. Every time she pretended her games were love. "Wish me luck for Monday," she said cheerfully. "Of course," I said. "You'll do great." She smiled, kissed my cheek, and went to bed early. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the faint blue glow of the Wi-Fi router across the room. It blinked steadily, indifferent. And that's when the thought came, slow, deliberate, poetic. If she could make me late for my world, perhaps I could make her disappear from hers. I didn't want to yell or fight. Those things were temporary. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt that morning. Helpless, panicked, stripped of control. I wanted her to stare at a ticking clock and realize too late that her games had consequences. Over the next few days, I said nothing. I smiled, made small talk, asked about her preparations for the interview. She told me about the company, about how much this job meant to her, how it was finally her turn to succeed. I listened carefully. Every detail mattered. Timing, schedule, location, and most importantly, connection. Leah's life ran on Wi-Fi. It wasn't just her job interviews or her social media. It was her validation, her stage, her mirror. The internet wasn't just a tool for her. It was her reflection. And she didn't realize yet that reflections could be shattered quietly. The night before her interview, she was humming again. "Big day tomorrow," she said, applying her skincare with methodical precision. "If I get this job, maybe we can finally stop arguing about money." I nodded. "I hope you do." I meant it in a way, but the truth beneath it was sharper. Sometimes, people only learn when the thing they value most stops responding to them. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the living room again, watching the small green light on the router blink in the dark. The hum of it filled the silence like a heartbeat. I unplugged the cable slowly, neatly, and placed the device inside my briefcase. Then I walked it out to the garage and slid it into the locked drawer of my tool cabinet. The green light vanished. When I returned to bed, I felt calm. Not triumphant, not cruel, just balanced. In the morning, Leah woke early, glowing with anticipation. She rehearsed her answers in front of the mirror, fixed her hair, double-checked her laptop. "Wish me luck," she said again, grinning. "Always," I replied, sipping my coffee. She didn't notice the silence yet, the absence of the faint hum, the missing flicker of green light in the corner of the room. She sat down, clicked open her laptop, and waited for the meeting link to load. It didn't. Her smile faltered. She refreshed the page, clicked again, then frowned. "What the?" I watched her face change slowly from confidence to confusion, from confusion to panic. And for the first time, I smiled, because the game had finally changed hands. Leah's confidence began to unravel in real time. It started with the little things, her eyebrows knitting together, her lips tightening, the way her perfectly manicured nails tapped faster against the table with every failed refresh. "Why isn't this working?" she muttered. I sat at the counter, my mug of black coffee steaming, watching quietly. It was remarkable how silence could be both weapon and mirror. It reflected her panic back at her with almost surgical precision. She rebooted the laptop, checked the settings, even blamed the device. "Maybe the Wi-Fi's just slow," she said under her breath, though her voice trembled. She rose from her chair and walked to the router's usual corner, bending slightly to check the lights. When she saw nothing but a blank socket, her expression changed. The smug ease she carried like perfume dissolved into a kind of raw disbelief. "Where the hell?" she whispered. I kept my voice calm. "Something wrong. The router, it's gone." I looked up from my mug. "Gone," I repeated, pretending confusion. "Yes, gone. Did you move it?" Her tone was rising now, sharp edges forming where composure used to be. I shrugged. "I don't touch that stuff. You're the tech-savvy one, remember?" Her mouth opened, then shut again. She scanned the floor, the nearby shelf, even the power cords, as if the device might be hiding behind the wall itself. I could almost see the realization dawning. This wasn't a random glitch. This was absence by design. Her phone buzzed. "They're waiting for me," she murmured, unlocking it. "Maybe I can hotspot." But her data had been unreliable for months. She'd chosen the cheapest plan. The connection failed before the call even opened. She tried again, this time pacing the room. I listened to her footsteps, rhythmic and desperate, like someone trying to stomp out a fire they couldn't see. "I can't lose this interview," she said finally, turning to me. "This job was my chance, Ethan. You know that." I set my mug down, folded my hands, and met her eyes. "You'll figure it out. You always do." She froze at the tone, flat, detached, unhurried. I could tell she recognized it, because it used to belong to her. She'd used that same voice whenever she called my frustration adorable. Whenever she watched me run late for meetings, she'd sabotaged with misplaced keys and innocent smiles. Now it was mine. Her breath came shorter. "This isn't funny anymore." "Who's laughing?" I asked softly. She glared at me, eyes glistening. "You did something." "I know you did." I didn't answer. Some truths lose their power once spoken. I wanted her to sit with uncertainty, the way she'd made me sit with mine that morning. The keys missing, the clock ticking, the sense that someone who claimed to love me was quietly pulling strings just to watch me fall apart. Her laptop chimed with another notification. Meeting starting now. The clock on the wall read 10:01. She was already late. She grabbed her phone again, pacing faster, trying every workaround she could think of. But each attempt only tangled her further in frustration. "Why isn't anything working?" she cried, half to herself, half to the universe. I leaned back in my chair. "Maybe," I said slowly, "you should have started looking earlier." The words hit her like a slap. She stared at me, her lips parting as recognition sank in. It was what she told me the morning she hid my keys. Word for word. She sank into the chair opposite me, exhaling shakily. For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. Her voice, the one that used to fill every silence, was gone. I didn't move to comfort her. I just watched. After several long minutes, she whispered, "Did you really do this?" Just to get back at me. I considered my answer carefully. "No," I said. "I did it so you'd understand." "Understand what?" "What it feels like," I replied. "To be ready for your world to move, only to realize someone else is holding the switch." She covered her face with her hands. "Ethan, this was important." I echoed. "So were the meetings I missed." Silence again. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds, yet they felt distant, like the world was continuing just fine while ours fractured quietly in this kitchen. After a while, she stood, her movements slower now. "You win," she said, voice thin. "Is that what you wanted?" I shook my head. "It's not about winning. It's about symmetry." Her laugh was brittle. "You sound insane." "Maybe." I took another sip of coffee. "Or maybe this is what happens when you mistake cruelty for comedy." She didn't respond. She walked to the bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. For hours afterward, I heard nothing but the faint creak of the floor when she moved. By evening, the house smelled of reheated pasta and tension. She avoided me at dinner, ate in silence, her eyes red. Later that night, I found her on the couch scrolling through job listings, her laptop finally connected to her phone's weak signal. She looked exhausted. "You can plug the router back in now," she said without looking up. "I didn't unplug it," I replied. "It's gone." She blinked. "Gone. I guess you'll have to organize better next time." Her shoulders slumped. She knew what that meant. The game was over. When I went to bed, the light from her laptop still glowed in the living room, pale and uncertain. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of my heartbeat filling the silence the router used to occupy. I thought about how easy it had been, how quickly the power shifted when silence became a choice instead of a weakness. And for the first time, I wondered if revenge always had to taste bitter. Because right then, it didn't. It tasted like coffee at the perfect temperature, dark, steady, and deserved. The next morning, I woke to a different kind of silence. Not the hollow one of absence, but the tense stillness that comes after realization. Leah didn't hum as she made breakfast. The TV stayed off. Even the sound of her footsteps seemed measured, as though she was walking on glass. I sat at the table, sipping my coffee, while she moved quietly around the kitchen. The steam rose between us like fog, thick and unspoken. She didn't ask about the Wi-Fi. She didn't mention the interview or the fact that she'd missed her best opportunity yet. Her pride wouldn't let her. Instead, she spoke in neutral tones about the weather, the grocery list, and how the neighbor's dog had dug up her garden again. It was strange, the way small talk could pretend to fill a void it would never reach. I answered when necessary, but didn't volunteer a word more than needed. She noticed. She always did. Around noon, she stood by the window, holding her phone, staring out into the backyard. "I might drive to my mother's for the weekend," she said. I nodded. "If that's what you need." "I just need space," she replied, almost defensively. I didn't argue. Let her take her space, I thought. Let her sit with silence long enough to know how much damage a quiet house can echo back. She turned away, maybe expecting me to plead with her, but I didn't. My calm unsettled her more than anger ever could. That afternoon, while she packed, I walked into the living room. The spot where the router once sat remained empty. a small void that somehow filled the room more than any piece of furniture ever had. I thought about plugging it back in, about ending this whole experiment before it went further than intended. But then I remembered her laughter, that smug, sharp sound the morning she hid my keys and told me to start earlier. It wasn't the act itself that had broken something in me. It was what it meant. It said, I have power over your day. I can decide how small you feel. And now, she finally knew what that felt like. When she left that evening, the air felt lighter. The quiet wasn't tense anymore. It was restful. I made dinner for one, cleaned the kitchen, and read a book I hadn't touched in months. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's performance. The stillness belonged to me again. But peace, I've learned, is deceptive. It doesn't last when guilt starts to whisper. The first whisper came that night. I sat in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I saw an email notification on our shared account, a message from the company Leah had interviewed with. The subject line read, "We regret to inform you." I opened it. They'd waited 15 minutes for her to join before closing the call. The interviewer even wrote, "We understand technical issues can happen, but we must proceed with other candidates." I stared at the words, feeling something twist in my chest. The email wasn't cruel, but it carried a finality that unsettled me. She'd lost more than a job that day. She'd lost the illusion of control, and I had been the architect of her fall. For the first time since this began, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Revenge is intoxicating, but it doesn't warn you when the line between justice and cruelty starts to blur. I told myself this wasn't about punishment. It was about understanding. But understanding doesn't leave someone broken. The next day, she texted me, "I'm at Mom's. Don't worry, I'm fine." That was all. No anger, no accusations, just distance. I replied simply, "Good." But even as I typed it, the satisfaction that had fueled me began to fade. I wasn't sure if I missed her or if I missed the version of myself that existed before the games began. I spent the weekend alone, trying to convince myself that what I'd done was fair. Every action had a mirror. Every cruelty deserved reflection. Yet when I walked past the empty corner where the router once stood, it didn't look like justice anymore. It looked like absence, mine and hers. On Sunday night, I found myself staring at the garage cabinet. The router sat inside, unplugged and dusting over slightly, its green light dormant like an eye waiting to open. I touched it, feeling the smooth plastic surface, the faint hum of guilt vibrating beneath my skin. I could plug it back in. I could restore balance. But a part of me wasn't ready yet. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about timing. When Leah came home the next morning, she looked different. Not broken, not angry, just quieter. Her confidence had melted into something more subdued. "I'm not mad," she said as she unpacked her bag. "I just realized some things." "Like what?" I asked. She hesitated, then met my eyes. That control isn't love. And that sometimes, when you keep pulling strings, eventually they snap. Her honesty disarmed me. I didn't respond right away. She nodded, as if expecting silence. "You were right to make me see that," she said finally. "But I hope you know you changed too." I didn't know. The mirror she'd been forced to face wasn't one-sided. I'd seen myself in it too. A man who'd once been patient, careful, forgiving. Now I was calculated, detached, cold in ways I didn't recognize. She'd created that part of me, but I was the one who decided to keep it. That night, I returned the router to its place. The small green light flickered back to life, blinking like a pulse returning to a flat line. Leah noticed, but didn't comment. She simply stared at it for a long time, then turned off her laptop and went to bed. I lay awake, watching the faint glow reflect on the ceiling. Balance had been restored, technically, but balance doesn't mean healing. Some damages don't fade. They just become part of the furniture, quiet, permanent, unseen. In the days that followed, the Wi-Fi light blinked steadily again, as if nothing had ever happened. Leah went through her motions, coffee, makeup, scrolling on her phone, but something in her rhythm was off. Her laughter had lost its edges. Her words came out softer, cautious. She moved like someone walking through the ruins of her own pride, pretending the ground wasn't still smoldering. For a while, that silence between us almost felt like peace. Almost. Peace has a way of testing its own limits. It asks questions in the quiet. Who are you now? What did you become while you were busy teaching lessons? Those questions started to haunt me each morning as I sat across from her. She smiled more now, but it wasn't the kind that reached her eyes. It was an apology wrapped in routine. She'd learned her part, maybe too well. On the third morning, she said, "I found another company hiring. The interview's next week." I nodded. "That's good." She hesitated. "I'll make sure I'm ready this time." "I'm sure you will," I said. The words sounded supportive, but inside they rang hollow. Something about the balance we'd built felt artificial. Revenge had given me a calm I mistook for closure, but it wasn't peace, it was numbness. And numbness is just anger wearing a quieter face. That night, I caught her staring at the router again. The small, blinking light flickered across her face like a heartbeat. "Funny," she said quietly, "how something so small can decide whether your day goes right or wrong." I looked up from my laptop. I guess we all have switches like that. Her eyes met mine, sharp but unreadable. Some people like flipping them. The air thickened between us. She didn't need to say more. I knew that she knew, and maybe, deep down, she'd known all along. Leah was many things, vain, manipulative, reckless, but never stupid. I saw the understanding pass across her face like a shadow. She'd finally realized what I'd done. That night, she went to bed early. I sat alone in the living room, staring at that same blinking light. Each flash felt like a question I didn't want to answer. What happens after the lesson is learned? Who do you become once the game ends? I told myself it didn't matter. But when you strip someone's pride away, you don't just silence them. You build an echo. And I could already hear it forming. The next morning, she was up before me. She'd made breakfast, something she hadn't done in months. The smell of bacon filled the house, warm and deceptive. "Morning," she said sweetly as I walked in. "Coffee's on the table." Her tone was pleasant, her smile practiced. For a moment, I almost believed it. I took a sip from my mug. "You're in a good mood," I said. "I just want things to be better between us," she replied. "No more games." It was almost convincing. Almost. But there was something about her voice, too even, too controlled, that made me pause. "Ich glänzte helplessly." No food. Just her hands clasped together, resting lightly, waiting. I felt something uneasy stir in my chest, like the air had shifted in a way I couldn't see yet. She leaned forward. "You know, I keep thinking about that morning, the one when I hid your keys." I looked at her carefully. "Do you?" She nodded. "I thought it was funny then. But watching you these past few weeks, I realized how cruel I was." Her eyes glistened, sincere on the surface. "I want to make it right." I didn't trust it. The apology came too neatly wrapped, like a speech rehearsed for an audience that might clap at the end. "Some things," I said slowly, "don't unhurt." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but maybe they can rebalance." The word rebalance caught in my throat. I set the mug down, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt. "What are you saying?" She tilted her head, that familiar gleam flickering behind her eyes, the one I thought I'd erased. "Nothing, Ethan. Just that sometimes people need to feel what they cause." It was subtle, but I heard it. A mirror of my own justification twisted back at me. She stood, kissed my cheek, and walked away before I could respond. The sound of her footsteps up the stairs felt deliberate, rehearsed, rhythmic, like an echo of my own plan months before. That evening, while cleaning the kitchen, I noticed my phone charger missing. Then my earbuds. Then, when I reached for the remote, the batteries were gone. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was too precise to be coincidence. Leah wasn't retaliating in fury. She was imitating me, learning my silence, my patience, my methods. I found her later on the patio, scrolling through her phone. "Did you move my charger?" I asked casually. She didn't look up. "Maybe you should be more organized," she said softly. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was calm, almost gentle. That scared me more than anger ever could. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the trap of revenge. It doesn't end when balance is restored. It breeds symmetry. You teach someone the language of quiet cruelty, and then they start speaking it fluently. The student becomes the reflection. In the darkness, I heard her breathing next to me, slow, steady, untroubled. I wondered if she felt what I had back then, that intoxicating calm that comes from control. I wondered if she finally understood the power of silence. And somewhere between midnight and morning, I wondered whether I'd just taught her too well. When dawn broke, the house felt different again. The coffee machine was unplugged. My alarm hadn't gone off. I opened the fridge and found every bottle cap loosened, every carton half empty. Harmless, small things, but unmistakably intentional. It was my turn to laugh softly now, not out of amusement, but out of recognition. She was giving me my lesson back, measured, precise, poetic. Balance, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, thin and pale, catching the dust that hung between us. I watched Leah moving about the kitchen, calm, graceful, humming softly. For a second, the illusion almost worked, the smell of toast, the clatter of plates, the casual rhythm of a shared morning. But there was something wrong in the details. The coffee pot had gone missing from its usual place. The butter knife was sticky with jam, and her smile lingered a little too long when she noticed my eyes scanning the counter. She was waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. I just opened the cupboard, found the coffee pot sitting on the top shelf where it never belonged, and placed it back on the counter without a word. She turned, her voice light. "You're getting forgetful, Ethan." The same line she'd used the morning she hid my keys. I recognized the rhythm of it. The gentle teasing meant to sound harmless. She'd learned to mimic tone like a musician repeating a melody. That realization struck deeper than I wanted to admit. Revenge had taught her my patience, my stillness, even my precision. The reflection I created was walking, breathing, and smiling across the table for me. I poured the coffee slowly, watching the stream rise like smoke between us. "How's your job search?" I asked. She shrugged, still looking. "Internet's better now, though. Thanks for fixing it." The way she said thanks carried weight, half acknowledgement, half accusation. I met her gaze over the rim of my cup. "I told you I didn't fix anything. It was always working." Her eyes didn't flinch. "Right." We sat in silence after that, two actors who had run out of script. It's strange how silence, when used enough times, stops being a shield and starts becoming a mirror. You end up staring at yourself in it, forced to face what you've become. I had spent weeks believing I was teaching her a lesson about cruelty, but now I wasn't sure if I'd simply handed her my tools. By noon, small inconveniences began to appear everywhere. My car keys were on the kitchen table instead of the hook where I always left them. The TV remote was in the freezer. My socks were mismatched in a drawer. Tiny things, nothing disastrous, but just enough to remind me that someone was orchestrating the disarray. I'd look at her, and she'd smile faintly, eyes glimmering with a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't anger she wanted me to feel. It was uncertainty, and she was succeeding. That evening, she made dinner, something rare these days. Roast chicken, seasoned the way I liked. The aroma filled the house with the kind of warmth that used to mean peace. But peace doesn't come from familiarity. It comes from trust, and trust was a stranger now. She poured us both a glass of wine, the deep red catching the light like spilled secrets. "Truce?" she asked. I studied her face. "Is that what this is?" She shrugged. "Maybe I just want things to feel normal again." "Normal died with the Wi-Fi," I said quietly. Her smile faltered for a moment. "Then maybe we build a new one." We ate mostly in silence. Halfway through the meal, she looked up and said, "Do you know what I realized when the connection went down that morning?" I didn't answer. I realized how much I depend on things I can't see. The signal, the timing, other people's approval. When it's gone, you start to wonder who you are without it. "That's the point," I said. Her voice softened. "No, Ethan, that was your point." She leaned forward slightly. "My point is different. I realize control feels safest when you're the one holding it." The sentence lingered between us, heavy and deliberate. She was telling me that she'd learned my language and that she planned to speak it fluently. After dinner, she cleared the table, humming that same low tune again. I noticed she washed only her plate, leaving mine in the sink. A small rebellion, subtle but sharp. I went to the living room and sat down, the weight of her words still pressing on my chest. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if I had awakened something I couldn't put back to sleep. Later that night, I went to make myself another coffee. The jar was empty, completely empty. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed under my breath. It was almost poetic. Leah walked in, towel draped around her neck, hair damp from shower. "What's funny?" "Nothing," I said. "Just forgot we were out." She opened the cupboard above the sink and pulled down a full jar of beans, placing it in front of me with a faint smile. "You always forget where things are." "Apparently," I said. She lingered a moment longer, watching me measure the grounds, the smile never leaving her face. When she finally walked away, I noticed she'd moved the sugar bowl to the other end of the counter. Not enough to be irritating, but enough that I'd notice. The coffee dripped slowly into the pot, the sound rhythmic and steady. I poured a cup, took a sip, and felt the bitterness spread through me. I couldn't taste the difference anymore between justice and pettiness, lesson and punishment. They'd all blended together into something flavorless. When I went upstairs, she was already in bed, reading. "Everything all right?" she asked without looking up. "Fine," I said. "Good," she murmured, turning a page. "You always look tired lately." "Maybe I'm just learning how to relax," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Maybe you're just learning what it feels like." I turned off the light. The darkness felt crowded somehow. Too many words left unsaid. Too many echoes bouncing off the walls. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing that this was no longer about the missing keys or the unplugged router. It was about the transformation we'd both undergone in the quiet spaces between arguments. She had become me, and I had become someone who didn't know how to stop. The next few mornings unfolded with the same slow rhythm, a fragile piece laced with unease. Leah and I moved through the house like actors in a forgotten play, our lines delivered with precision but without meaning. Every sound felt amplified, the clink of dishes, the whir of the refrigerator, even the soft rustle of her slippers against the tile. The air between us was thick, filled with things that could no longer be said out loud. It began with small, deliberate malfunctions. One evening I came home to find my laptop unplugged, the battery drained to nothing. The next day my alarm failed to ring. The settings had been changed to a different time zone. It was always small enough to question whether it was intentional. That uncertainty was the weapon. I had used it once. Now it belonged to her. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had one long ago, that my lesson had been delivered and received. But victory feels hollow when the other person learns how to fight in silence. I started checking everything twice before bed. The locks, the lights, the coffee maker. I was guarding against ghosts of my own creation. On Thursday, I came home to find Leah sitting on the couch with her laptop open. The glow from the screen lit her face, calm but unreadable. She looked up. "The company I missed the interview with, they posted another position." "That's good," I said, hanging my coat. "I applied," she continued, closing the laptop, "and I got an email back within an hour. They said they were impressed by how polite my apology was." I hesitated. "Apology?" "For missing the first interview," she said smoothly. "I told them my husband accidentally disconnected the router that morning." The words landed soft but sure. She didn't look at me when she said them. She just stood, walked past me, and went upstairs. I stayed there in the living room, staring at the empty space she'd left behind, feeling the quiet thrum of humiliation in my chest. It wasn't anger that rose in me. It was something colder, a recognition. The mirror was no longer tilted in my favor. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too still, too heavy. I could hear her breathing in the dark, slow and even. I lay awake, counting seconds, each one stretching longer than it should. I thought about the router, about how that single act of disconnection had rippled outward until everything familiar had turned against me. I had wanted balance. Instead, I had created symmetry. Two people trapped in reflection, each waiting for the other to blink. The next morning, I brewed my coffee early, before dawn. The sound of the machine filling the silence felt grounding. When I turned to reach for the sugar, I froze. The spoon jar was empty. Every spoon in the drawer was gone. It was ridiculous, petty, but I understood the language. This was her version of unplugging a cable. When Leah came downstairs, she didn't greet me. She poured herself juice, glanced at the counter, and said, "You should really keep track of things. It's getting messy." Her tone was casual, but her eyes glimmered with something sharp. I almost laughed at the irony. "Where did you put them?" I asked. She looked out the window. "Maybe try being more organized." The words echoed the first morning of all this, months ago, when I'd stood helpless in that same kitchen, searching for my keys. The symmetry was perfect, too perfect, and it terrified me. I left for work without saying goodbye. All day, I couldn't concentrate. The reflection of my face in my computer screen looked pale, hollow. Somewhere between justice and punishment, I had lost something essential. It wasn't love. I'd accepted that was gone. It was control. Control of who I was before all this began. That evening, when I returned home, Leah was in the kitchen cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and butter filled the air, deceptively domestic. She turned and smiled. "I made enough for both of us." The table was set neatly, the silverware polished, the missing spoons replaced. I sat down slowly, half expecting another twist. But she just served the food, poured 2 glasses of wine, and said nothing. Halfway through the meal, she spoke. "I think we're even now." The statement was simple, but it carried the weight of months. I looked at her, at the calm expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Even," I repeated. She nodded. "You unplugged me. I unplugged you. You made me panic. I made you wonder. We've both learned, haven't we?" "Learned what?" "That when you strip someone's control, you strip your own peace too." I stared at her for a long moment, unsure whether it was remorse or manipulation. She held my gaze without flinching. "You can stop watching for the next move," she said. "I'm done playing." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the game had finally burned itself out. But the truth sat heavy between us. Once you teach someone how to wound without leaving marks, that knowledge doesn't disappear. It lingers under the skin, waiting. After dinner, she went upstairs. I stayed behind, cleaning the dishes, each clang of ceramic echoing too loud. The air smelled of soap and something faintly metallic. When I finished, I sat at the table, staring at the router's blinking light in the corner. It pulsed steadily, indifferent to everything that had happened around it. For a long time, I just listened to the hum of the house, to the faint static that filled the silence when 2 people had said too much without speaking. And somewhere between one blink and the next, I realized the war had already ended. There were no victors here, only survivors. Morning light crept over the kitchen tiles, pale and clean, as if the house itself wanted to start over. I sat at the table, watching the coffee drip. The scent rose, warm and familiar, but it no longer felt like comfort. It felt like evidence. Leah came down the stairs dressed for work, even though she didn't have a job yet. Her posture was poised, deliberate, as though the simple act of standing upright were a declaration that she was still here. We didn't speak for a while. The quiet was its own kind of conversation, one that said everything words would only distort. Finally, she poured herself a glass of water and said, "I've been thinking." "So have I," I answered. Her voice stayed steady. "We can't keep doing this." I nodded. Agreed. But the air didn't clear. It never does that easily. She leaned on the counter, the sunlight cutting her profile in half. Light on one side, shadow on the other. "Do you ever miss how it used to be?" "Sometimes," I said. "But I can't tell if I miss us or just the quiet before everything broke." Her eyes softened. "Maybe both." She took a slow breath. "I don't hate you, Ethan. I know. And I don't think you hate me either." "I don't," I said truthfully. "I just stopped recognizing you." That admission seemed to loosen something in her shoulders. She looked away. Maybe that's fair. Maybe I stopped recognizing myself, too. We stood in that kitchen, surrounded by the same objects that had witnessed every petty war. Keys, router, coffee mug, the small battlefield of our pride. All of it seemed absurd now. Two people clawing at each other's control because they didn't know how to talk anymore. She broke the silence first. You know, when I hid your keys that morning, I thought I was teaching you to slow down. I told myself I was helping you. And when I took the router, I said quietly, I told myself I was teaching you to pay attention. We both gave the same small, tired smile. The symmetry was ridiculous and perfect. That evening, we sat outside for the first time in months. The air smelled of rain and cut grass, ordinary and forgiving. She wrapped her hands around her cup of tea while I stared at the sky. For a while, we talked about things that didn't matter, neighbors, the broken mailbox, the sound of the train at night. But beneath those small things, there was something fragile being rebuilt. At one point, she said, I reconnected the router myself, you know. That night you thought it was still gone. I looked at her. Why? I wanted to see if you'd notice. You didn't. I laughed softly. Guess we both stopped noticing a lot of things. The sound of it, our laughter, faint and real, felt foreign and familiar all at once. Later, as the sun dipped and the world dimmed to amber, she said, maybe forgiveness isn't about saying sorry. Maybe it's about not keeping score anymore. Maybe, I said, but forgetting is harder. She nodded. Then maybe remembering without the anger is enough. We didn't make promises. We didn't hold hands. We just sat there, breathing in the same quiet that had once divided us. The blinking light of the router glowed faintly through the window, a reminder, a pulse, proof that connection could be lost and found again if someone cared enough to look. That night, when we went inside, the house felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was waiting. Rain came that night, soft at first, then heavier, until the roof hummed with it. I sat alone in the living room, the glow of the router blinking steadily in the corner. The tiny green light looked almost alive, breathing in time with the storm. I stared at it for a long while, thinking about how something so small had become the center of everything we'd built, destroyed, and tried to rebuild. Connection, disconnection, power, silence, all of it reduced to a single pulse of light. Leah came down the stairs quietly, her shadow stretching long across the floor. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, watching me, then walked to the couch and sat beside me. The smell of her shampoo, subtle, clean, ordinary, filled the space between us. You're up late, she said softly. I couldn't sleep, I replied. She nodded. Me neither. We sat there, listening to the rain, the steady hum of the house, the faint rhythm of the router's heartbeat. It was strange how much comfort silence could hold once it stopped being a weapon. For months, we'd used it to punish each other, to make the other feel small, unseen, unimportant. But now it felt neutral, quiet but not cold. After a while, she said, I didn't apply for that second job. I turned to her. Why not? She shrugged. Because I realized I was doing it to prove something, not because I wanted it. I don't want to live like that anymore, always trying to prove I'm in control. I let her words settle before answering. Neither do I. She looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her eyes didn't carry sharpness or challenge. They were just tired, human. I think I understand now, she said. When you unplugged the Wi-Fi that morning, I thought you were trying to hurt me. But maybe you were just trying to show me what it feels like to lose connection, to everything, even yourself. I nodded slowly, and when you hid my keys, maybe you were doing the same without realizing it. You were reminding me that I'd already lost something long before that day. Her expression softened. What was that? My patience, I said quietly. My curiosity, my willingness to listen before reacting. Somewhere between the jokes and the silence, we both forgot how to be kind. She leaned back, exhaling. So what happens now? I watched the light blink again, steady and sure. We start over, but not like before. Not pretending it didn't happen. Just learning to speak again without turning every word into a weapon. She nodded. The rain began to ease outside, thinning to a gentle drizzle. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It just felt still. We didn't hug, didn't promise forever. But when she reached out and placed her hand near mine on the couch, the space between us felt smaller. After she went to bed, I stayed up a little longer. The clock ticked softly beside me. I thought about how easily things break when people stop paying attention, how jokes become cruelty, how silence becomes distance, how connection becomes control. Revenge had never been about power. It had always been about balance. But the truth I'd learned was simpler than that. Balance means nothing without understanding. I stood, walked over to the router, and pressed the reset button. The light went out for a second, then came back brighter, blinking faster before settling into its steady rhythm again. It wasn't poetic, it was practical. It didn't erase what had happened, but it was a beginning. Before turning in, I brewed one last cup of coffee. The scent filled the air, rich and grounding. I poured 2 cups and left one for her on the table, steam curling up like forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken. When I finally lay down, the rain had stopped. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. If this story made you pause, if it reminded you how fragile connection can be, hit like to show your support. Comment your thoughts on what true forgiveness means. Share this story with someone who understands quiet wars. And subscribe for more dark, emotional tales that reveal the cost of pride and the price of peace. Because sometimes the strongest signal is the one we restore within ourselves.